Welcome to the blog. Today I want to talk about free trade and tariffs. That's of course Donald Trump. He ran his 2016 election campaign basically on building the wall and stopping China. And both subjects are very, very important for the Western world today. I want to dig in a little to it. The first argument that Trump is putting up is that he want to punish China. But be aware of that argument, because a tariff, a tax on Chinese goods is not being paid by the Chinese. It is a tax that's going to be put on goods that arrives at the US border. So for example, a sporting bag, Nike, made in China, arrives at the border in US, costs $10 at Walmart. This bag is going to go up to $12. The Chinese doesn't pay a thing of that. The US consumer at Walmart buying the bag, they're paying $12 instead of $10. That $2 extra is going into the US Treasury to fund the government. The Chinese, they are not paying a dime of this. The consumer who's in Walmart with $100, they are accustomed to buying 10 things at $10 each. Now everything costs $12 instead of 10. That means now they can only buy 8. That means the level of consumption goes down. The level of consumption means a lower living standard. That is how a tariff works. The Chinese pay nothing, the US consumer pays everything, and the volume of goods sold in America is gonna fall, period. At the same time, the government is gonna get funded that way. Usually the government is funded by income tax, property taxes. Now they're gonna get funded by consumption tax. But I wanna go back to the early days of civilization. When you lived with your family in a cave somewhere, you had to do everything yourself. You had to fish, you had to hunt, you had to find berries, you had to build your own house, you had to do everything yourself. As villages came along, they happened because people found out, you know what, I'm pretty good at hunting, but I'm an awful house builder. So you went hunting all day, and all the rabbits and all the things that you caught in the forest, you traded that with the carpenter because he was a really good house builder. He didn't know how to catch a rabbit. So that's how the trade started. You know, you traded your skills with somebody who had better skills at other areas than you, and it worked well. Soon it wasn't just within the village, it was within the country. So if somebody in New York was good at making financial services, and in Florida we are very good at housing people who loves the sun, you know what? You trade. That's how it works. When America was founded 250 years ago, America instantly became a free trade zone. A free trade zone basically means that you can, just like you could in your village, you can trade with your neighbor or a guy across the street. Now you can trade across state lines from New York to Florida to California, wherever you wanted. The government didn't interfere. And that became a huge success. America became the dominant power of the world, by far the richest country in the world, because of the free trade, among other things, of course. But that was one of the biggest things. Free trade is a winner. It brings the best out of us. We can specialize what we're good at, and what we're not good at, leave that to others. You know, that is really, really a nice thing. After the Second World War, the Europeans saw this. They created the Steel and Coal Union. It was basically a free trade zone where British steel could go to Germany, where they'd build cars from it. We'd sell that to the French. The French would go to vacation in Italy, and so on. It enacts specialization. You as a person, you as a village, you do what you're best at, and you trade that product with somebody who's better at something else. It's a brilliant system. The European Union, from the Coal and Steel Union, evolved into a myriad of things. Now it's immigration, there's a lot of other things. But the European Union was founded on the basic of free trade, which is a brilliant idea. And the reason it worked, Europe came back on its feet after the Second World War in a record pace. It was amazing how the Germans, the core of Europe, was able to rebuild the whole core of Europe in no time. And it was basically because of free trade, of course, amongst other things, but it's a very, very crucial part of it. The way it worked so nicely was because when free trade was enacted between, for example, Germany and Britain, those societies, they looked alike. We had the same moral values, the same living standard somehow. So when it was enacted, it just put capital to work where it worked the best. It worked as a miracle. People in Portugal and the population in Denmark, of course there's difference, but somehow we're on the same level, somehow we share culture, we share living standards to a certain degree. That's why the free trade worked as a miracle for everybody in the society. There was basically no downsides to it. The difference this time is the last 30 years we opened up for free trade, and as we know, as we can think rationally about, the comparative advantage works miracles. Everybody gets richer. And this time it worked too. The last 30 years, the amount of people who've been pulled out of poverty in China is an astonishing accomplishment. Vietnam, India, same story to a lesser degree. It's been a dramatic success, one of the biggest successes in world history. That's a big statement. So many people have their lives improved because of the free trade. It's been great for those third world countries, the developing countries. It's been great for the consumer in the Western world. But there's a group we haven't talked about yet. That's the forgotten group. That's the core of the Western European and the American mainland. Those jobs have disappeared because when this thing opened up, average Joe, he lived in a highly industrialized country with high living expenses. All of a sudden, he didn't compete against Peter and Paul down the street or Peter and Paul in another city or another state. No, he competed against somebody in Bangladesh making sneakers. That's an uneven game. It is impossible for a Westerner to compete with production in low cost countries. It's impossible. Remember, the lawyers, the bankers, the realtors, they're not competing against a lawyer, a banker, a realtor in Vietnam or in China. So it's only a certain group of our population that have been subjected to this competition. So that's why they're hurting so much. And as you know, we had the discussion how we're going to help these. Are we going to give them education? Are we going to give them better benefits by raising the spending on the poor, raising the taxes on the rich? But it's impossible. It's impossible to raise the taxes on the rich. We've been talking about it. They're going to flee. Look at fiat. We talked about it last week. You cannot raise the taxes because the capital and the talent is going to leave. I don't know if they're going to leave 100% and it's going to be 50%. But the last thing we need in the West is capital and talent to leave. We don't need that. We need to recreate what we had in the past. And that was a situation where the government's main role was to create a level playing field where everybody has a chance. The government, they should ensure that everybody have a chance to advance in life. They shouldn't guarantee outcome because there's no guarantees if you're lazy or you don't want to work or you're unintelligent, or who knows what. There's no guarantee that you're going to prosper, but you should have the chance. And in today's society, that chance for a lot of people is getting lesser and lesser. So we want to talk about what do we do in this situation. Donald Trump, he says we have to raise the tariffs up because this way we're going to punish China, which we just debated is not true. We're not punishing China, we're punishing the consumer. But by doing that thing, we are lessening consumption. And I think it's about time. We have enough stuff. We have enough chairs, sneakers, jeans. We don't need that much. So if the consumption on imported goods falls a little bit, to me, so be it. The money that comes in from the consumption tax, the tariff is a consumption tax, will go into the coffers of the government. That money should be used to lower the taxes. Because if you lower taxes, you attract capital, you attract talent, and you incentivize work. And that's what we need in the Western world. We need to get back to the basics of what made us, the Western world, the richest part of the world. What made us being able to control the world more? Let's go around and say, do good, don't do bad, dictators, we won't have anything to do with it. We had the power, the money to uphold a moral standard. All that money, all that power came from one thing. It came from capitalism. And it came from the government creating a level playing field. So we could work hard, compete hard, see who was best. And remember, in capitalism, the harder you work, the better service you provide for other people, the richer you get. It's a brilliant system. So we need to get back to that. Of course, tariffs is not a golden bullet that's going to save the day. Because when you import, the stuff you import is going to be more expensive, consumption is going to fall, it's going to have some dramatic consequences. That's one thing, but there's another consequence. If we put taxes on Chinese sneakers, Chinese clothes, guess what? They're going to put taxes on our grain export here from America. Or if Europe did it, they would put taxes on Mercedes-Benzes going to China. So that means that the car factories and the farmers here, their demand for their products would fall dramatically. So for example, a farmer here who have 100 acres, he have 10 machinery for farming equipment, all of a sudden 20% of his demand is disappearing. That farmer, he's not making any money any longer. He might go bankrupt, he might lose his savings. So as a society, if we do tariffs all of a sudden to hit the Chinese, we're gonna hit the farmer who worked hard and invested all his capital all these years in farm equipment. So we're gonna put a farmer out of business by putting tariffs up when we import sneakers. That's not fair either. So my point is here, there's no easy way out of this, and everything has to be dealt with. If we erect those tariffs that Trumps are talking about, it's gonna have dramatic consequences for everybody. A farmer out west, a factory who produces to sell to China. And we gotta address that. We can't just say, farmer, you have to go bankrupt, you lose everything. We can't do that. We can't say the same to a factory. Oh, your customers, they disappeared because they counter-tariffed. We can't do that. So as a society, if we embark on this grand project of tariffs, which by first sound very, very promising, we have to understand the gravity of it. It's like an earthquake that changes the whole system. We started an earthquake 30 years ago during the World Trade Organization. Maybe now is the time to reverse that just a little bit. Free trade have to be fair trade. For many years now, when we sent to the Chinese, they wouldn't let Chinese consumers buy our products without getting taxed. So that hurt Western countries' exports. That's not fair, that gotta change, and it gotta change fast. And Trump, he's in the front of that. He is grabbing the bull by the horns and he's saying, no more, the Chinese, you're not taking advantage. If we're gonna continue this free trade, fair trade, it's gonna get even. 0% this way, 0% that way. And for that part of the discussion, that just can't be in the discussion. The game is up. From now on, it's 0-0 or 10-10. So in that, we gotta support Trump and we gotta get behind it. And when the Chinese get up on that chair and say, we will support free trade and all that, it's all BS. They had all the advantages, none of the disadvantages, and that gotta stop. But to sum up today's blog is that when you get to tariffs, it sounds intriguing, it sounds like a nice way to move taxation from work into consumption, and it is a nice way, but it has profound implications on the society. Some groups gonna suffer. Here, it's got the farmers. In Germany, it could be Mercedes-Benz. Those groups in the society will have their whole life savings, their businesses, not bankrupted, but hurt tremendously from these actions. So we gotta find a way how to deal with all that if we're gonna go that way. That's all from today. If you like today's blog, please like it, please share it. If you have any comments or wanna know any deeper into this, just text me, just write in the comment section or write me personally, I'll answer it. See you next time.